have an admission. I think I annoyed one of my work colleagues recently. I guess that makes me human. I hope you can see this. If there's anyone who can't, this is the bumper of a car. More specifically, it's the bumper of a beautiful top-spec Audi A6 with a scratch on it. It's my colleague's bumper. Now, for the avoidance of doubt, I had nothing to do with this scratch. I don't know if anyone spotted the irony of this image. The scratch is on the exact location that the reversing sensor is located. Now, if there was one area, any area on a car that I would expect not to be scratched, this is probably it. Now, maybe I'm being too logical about it, maybe too inhuman, if you will. But if there was, one thing, then this is the problem. And when I saw it, I couldn't help myself. It just came out. I shouted, "This is perfect for the talk I'm giving at GIF." And then I whipped out my smartphone to take a photo. And then the researcher in me sprang to life, and I said to him, "What were you thinking?" Thankfully, he is not a violent man. Thankfully, he's an innovator, and he accepted my question with good grace. His answer was actually very interesting. Here's what he said. "I'd had the car a few months. I got so complacent about the beeper, which starts going off about 3 meters from anything, that I completely ignored it." In a car park, you're never more than 3 meters from something, right? "Even when the beep went solid, I still ignored it, because you've still got a couple of feet to go, right?" And then there was the crunch. And it set off a train of thought for me. It set me thinking about how often we engage with technology that's been developed with the best of intent to make our lives easier, but somehow fails to accommodate the human dimension. The irony is that all of this technology has been developed by real people, for real people. So where does it go wrong? And this is the theme of my reflections today, designing in HD, designing in human dimension. As I pondered, more and more examples came to mind where good human intent was translated into technology that somehow lost the ability to contextually empathise. Motorway signs. "Icy conditions possible. Use caution." Wow, really? Digital motorway signs, or as they are affectionately known in the industry, AMI-VMSs, Advanced Motorway Indicator Variable Messaging Signs. Whew. If you really want something to make it human, sound empathetic, not be empathetic, give it a 3-letter acronym or a 6-letter acronym. Can you imagine something like this having a 3-letter acronym? This is a PAS, a Portable Affection Simulator. No, it's a teddy bear. I'll breathe some life into it. It's my daughter's teddy bear. If I wanted to make it even more human, I would tell you it's a him, and he's called Sam. I would tell you some stories about Sam. The time that Sam fell into a pond and had to have an adventure in the washing machine. The time that Sam got left at Nana and Grandad's and had to travel in a box all on his own for 2 days. The time Sam's arm got torn and Mummy had to perform some delicate, scary surgery. I should emphasise that for GDPR compliance, all names have been changed in this example. Seriously, digital motorway signs. Am I alone in thinking that all they do is reinforce the bloody obvious or spread unfounded rumours? These things are the tabloid press of the semiotic world. If we have the misfortune to see this sign, I think we all know that 50 miles an hour is the last thing that we're going to be doing. We'll either be at a total standstill or carrying on at 70, wondering what all the fuss was about. The problem is this disconnect between the good intent and the contextual deployment of the technology, the messaging, the timing of that messaging, how we as humans overlay our own multi-sensory perceptions and our own pattern recognition. It's the combination of all of these things that ultimately determines our actions, not the semiotic gossip of a variable messaging sign. Now, the neuroscience of pattern recognition has always fascinated me. Pattern recognition occurs when information from our environment enters our short-term memory and causes automatic activation of events from our long-term memory. And recognising patterns allows us to predict and expect what's coming, matching information that's stored in the brain with what we're seeing and hearing. It's a deeply embedded evolutionary mechanism. intended to keep us safe. Although avoiding flesh-eating carnivores is less of a problem these days, we still rely heavily on this mechanism to allow us to sift through the information and prioritise. Driving is one example where we still rely on pattern recognition a lot, and it helps us prioritise information based on previous experiences. Now, the problem is that sometimes we can look without seeing. Our brain looks for routine patterns, for example, cars, but we can miss the things that we're not looking for.
How close does a biker have to be before you see them? Here, here, or here. At a junction, look, then look again. Think, take longer to look for bikes.
This idea of looking at the environment without actually seeing things that don't fit a historical pattern is actually an interesting metaphor for our work as innovators as we gather insight and go around creating concepts. The good news is there are innovation methods that we can use to draw our attention beyond the norms, to break the pattern, and I'll talk about some of those in a moment. I'm going to briefly get on my soapbox here. Pattern recognition underlies one of my frustrations with the education framework. I'm not an educationalist. I have no credentials in this field at all, other than having been to school and being a parent. But this fixation with exams from the earliest age seems overly biased towards screening for photographic memories and for understanding rather than understanding or the promotion of creativity. And I think, schooling children and predicting what's going to happen next based on this kind of stored information database doesn't feel like the best way of preparing our kids for an uncertain future full of unexpected opportunity. Sir Ken Robinson explores this idea in his talk, Do Schools Kill Creativity? And I'd highly recommend it. This tension between pattern recognition and creativity has an interesting parallel with innovation. Operating to pattern is fine for incremental category maintenance, scoring concepts against existing products and concepts, but no good to us if we're trying to do breakthrough. How can we hope to come up with genuinely different solutions if we allow historical patterns to lead our innovation judgment? Using this metaphor of looking at our environment without seeing also reminds me of the traditional model of demographic segmentation. It gives so little insight into how real people are living their lives, the day-to-day social, emotional and functional challenges. A demographic map like this could tell us literally anything. How many times do we look at the competitive environment, today's norm, without realising the limitations the current and historical patterns place upon us? Cassettes, 35mm film, heating controllers, taxis, we all know where these market disruption case studies end up. Wasn't it just the technologies that changed, killing industries, creating new ones, but the fact that these things delivered a fundamentally better human experience? They reduced friction, they offered greater choice, increased speed and convenience. The same lessons apply to every other industry. This was the first mouse. After pressing arrow keys for years, people had to learn how to use it, but it quickly became the norm, the gold standard. It was just so intuitive. What's killing the mouse? The swipe. If you want to feel old, let a 3-year-old loose on your non-touchscreen laptop and watch the confusion as they leave sticky smears across your display. Other categories. Ostomy Care. This is an ostomy bag. It's worn by people who have a stoma, which is an opening made in the abdomen, usually as a result of trauma or bowel disease. Waste is diverted into the bag, and of course it has to be worn all day, every day. My grandfather had one, and although as a child I never saw it, I had some sense of the impact that it had on his routine and his relationship with my grandmother, who increasingly had to take over the maintenance routine as he lost his sight in later life. I can only begin to imagine the impact on younger users of products like this. Staying attached while playing sports, being easy to empty on a night out with friends. It would be easy to let the technical specification drive our innovation efforts here, but there is a whole human dimension to develop, and if the focus is on these things, it can change the game. Like many intimate topics, this is a highly emotionally charged category. The fears of odour leakage on confidence at work, wanting to sunbathe on the beach, being sexy, intimate. There's a young entrepreneur called Stephanie Monti whose family struggles with Crohn's disease have led her to create a concept for a better stoma device, and last year her company Ostomy gained its first round of funding, a major step forwards to realising her vision on empowering people to be able to feel able to sunbathe on the beach. I find this inspired and inspirational, and I can't take any credit for Stephanie's work, but I am very proud to say that our manufacturing team are working with her to help take this to market. The fact is, an emotionally rewarding product that offers an intuitive experience is highly likely to generate revenue for your business. It may seem obvious, but many companies continue to be led by the technology rather than a human-centered approach to innovation, adding more whizzy functions rather than focusing on the needs of potential customers. When we uncovered emotional and functional requirements for improved knife control during research into food prep, it unlocked genuinely new creative opportunities for the design team, such as the now patented indent on the back of the blade. Enhancing or reinventing experiences is a natural result of designing in human dimension. These are the emotional benefits that keep us coming back to a product or brand. Novo invented insulin delivery in 1925. The focus even back then on giving users a better self-injection experience. They reinvented insulin delivery in 1985 with the world's first insulin pen. It turns out that the real pain point in the self-administration experience was less physical and more embarrassment of injecting. One of the key insights was that injecting, especially in public, had huge social stigma. Users felt judged in restaurants and other on-the-go locations, typically associated with the need to take insulin and the unfortunate parallels of syringe use with drug abuse. Of course, this fear naturally had impact on adherence, people taking their drugs when they needed to, and obviously that had health consequences, and as everyone knows, if you don't stick to a pharmaceutical regimen, there are dangers and maybe even life-threatening issues. So this format helped change perceptions, both of users and of those around them. By looking at the problem from a human needs perspective, Novo were inspired to push the boundaries of the experience and actually, as a result, develop a better technology. All around us, technologies that answer real human needs are delivering better experiences. However, sometimes humans are still more central to the tech than we might think. Many of us travel frequently. This is probably a foreign travel trip for you now. And of course, when you get back to your hotel room tonight, before you head to the bar, you will staple all your receipts together and diligently catalogue them. Or, like 4.5 million other people, you might reach for Expensify or one of these other apps that helps you to submit all your receipts. If you're not familiar, this is an app that uploads to the cloud for machine transcription, sort of. It turns out the machine learning behind some of these apps may not be entirely machine-based. It was recently reported that Expensify had been using humans to transcribe some of the submitted documents, and some of these humans were recruited through Amazon's Mechanical Turk service. This is a service that assigns human intelligent tasks to interpret the images the SmartScan technology was struggling with. Now, this is kind of interesting. The name Mechanical Turk actually comes from a device created in 1769 by a Hungarian called Wolfgang von Kempelen, who created a chess-playing machine that defeated almost every opponent it faced. A life-sized wooden mannequin dressed in a fur-trimmed robe and a turban, Kempelen's Turk, sat behind this chess cabinet. And to help persuade sceptical audiences, Kempelen would slide open the cabinet door to reveal this intricate mechanism of cogs and gears and springs, genuinely convincing them he'd made a machine that operated on artificial intelligence. What they did not know is that the secret behind the Mechanical Turk was in fact a chess master cleverly concealed inside. Amazon were inspired by this work and created the MTurk service. It's basically a global marketplace for tasks requiring human intelligence. Workers have the chance to select from tasks to complete whenever it's convenient to them. It confirms this idea that there are still things that humans can do much more effectively than computers, such as identifying objects in photos or video. How do we feel about this? Aside from the privacy concerns about humans processing other humans' data without the appropriate consents, is humans pretending to be a machine a good thing, a bad thing? Does it highlight how far AI still has to go? Does it highlight opportunities for innovators? Some tech businesses are still fiercely unashamed of their continued reliance on human intelligence. Another recent headline was that Alphabet, the corporate parent of Google, Waymo, and many more, has been using reCAPTCHA answers to teach Waymo's autonomous cars to decipher visual information. For example, telling the difference between a human depicted on a sign on the sidewalk with an actual human. Every time we fill out one of these spam protection puzzles, we are bringing driverless car technology a step closer. OMG. I can't decide whether I find that unbelievably creepy or unbelievably cool. Disbelief aside, I think these headlines show how humans can work hand in hand more effectively with technology, taking the best of human intellect and contextual interpretation and delivering more human-centered solutions. With the pressure to connect to users faster, innovate faster, design sprints are of course now becoming a more common way of working. But there's this tension between systematic evidence gathering and decision making and rapid iterative leaps. The term MVP, another three-letter acronym, sorry, minimum viable product, has of course worked our way into standard innovation vocabulary. Maybe not very human as an acronym, but actually as a methodology, very much so. This idea of providing the minimum feature set, getting it in front of people as quickly as possible and seeing what happens. An MVP, of course, is the first down payment on a much, much bigger vision. But if you're going to achieve your goals, you've got to divide it up into bite-sized chunks and be prepared to pivot. And there are lots of tools that we can use to help us on this journey. The Mechanical Turk reminded me of Wizard of Oz testing. It's a technique named, not surprisingly, after the classic film, where the all-powerful wizard is eventually exposed as just a normal man standing behind the curtain, and it's routinely used in interaction development. If you're basing fundamental design decisions on early market and user feedback, it's important that you get unbiased reactions. However, the tension is that subjects tend to modify their behaviour when they know they're being watched. It's called the Hawthorne effect. One solution is to make it appear as if it's not a test, or make the user unaware of what it is that you're testing, which allows you to evaluate new products and services without actually needing the products to work or even look like the real thing. It's about the experimenter creating the realistic illusion to allow to see what the interaction is with users. We've seen illusions earlier on. So, for example, users might believe they're communicating directly with a computer using voice commands. The illusion is of voice recognition, when in reality their words are being entered manually by the experimenter behind the curtain. The goal may be to observe how the user interacts with the voice recognition system rather than to measure a beta test technology. Products and service prototypes merely need to work on a level where the concept can be given to users to study how they interact. It's about identifying problems before big time, big money is spent. There are only other innovation techniques that we can use to learn about people's real-world interactions and habits. For many industries, adherence is a big problem. How to drive it, how to maintain it, and I'm not just talking about the pharma industry. In the service industry, great experiences equal brand and customer loyalty. That equals repeat business, from airlines to banking. In fast-moving consumer goods and consumer health, if we want users to stick to the recommended regimen, frankly, if there are any credible claims to be made, we need them to stick to what we're asking them to do. But how do we check what's really happening? A diary study? Well, whether digital or analog, I think we all know that diaries can be very subjective and that consumers don't always say what they did. Often it's not even conscious. It's not they're being difficult or evasive. The demands of a busy lifestyle might get in the way of completing the diary. Maybe it's a taboo or an intimate topic and they're just a bit embarrassed about what it is that happened. As innovators, these inaccuracies can be massively frustrating, and more than that, they can actually drive us down the wrong path. How about lifelogging cameras, also known as PIC technology, PIC, portable image capture? These things automatically take a photograph every 30 seconds for the duration of a consumer study. Some say a big benefit for market research. Now, don't get me wrong, I think this tech could generate some really cool imagery, especially in extreme scenarios where hands-free operation is critical, such as skydiving, swimming with sharks, parenting. But as someone that spent a lot of time decoding consumer needs and translating them into specifications, there's a problem. There are 2,880 chunks of 30 seconds in any 24-hour period. That's 2,880 photographs that a researcher has to go through without any real context as to what may be an insight or the chance to dig deeper if one emerges. Now, these challenges weren't lost on us. Our research team travelled around the world looking for insight to frame a problem in the right way and turn it into a spec. So we sat down with our software electronics team and started to brainstorm, and I'm fast tracking here, but the outcome was the development of a miniaturized suite of sensors that is embedded in devices and packaging over extended field trials in order to understand normal behavior more effectively. It's used in current products like an injector pen and a toothbrush, and also in new prototypes. We call it Dialogue. And the sensor suite and the power unit is developed bespoke for each inquiry, but the space depends on the nature and length of the trial. So it can example duration of use, shock loading, temperature, humidity, and so on. We worked with Avon recently on one of their products. So they had an insight, and it was that women can become disappointed over time with anti-aging products. So they created this new single pack which had 2 different night creams that are rotated once every 7 days. Now, the clinical data proved that it worked over a 12-month period, but Avon wanted additional proof that real-world users could actually follow that regimen. And the summary is that after a 1-month field trial, actually we were able to highlight some strengths, some weaknesses, validate the adherence model, and provide some recommendations for future product development. I mentioned NovaPen earlier as a game changer in the drug delivery industry, and we're trying to move the experience on again with our Claris concept, which we won an award for earlier this year. I really want to emphasize the focus on experience. We created a detailed map of the self-administration user experience, uncovering every detail of what people might be thinking, feeling, doing in order to accomplish their goal. The purpose is to understand a timeline of customer needs and pain points. This experience aligns well with another innovation technique that you're probably familiar with, jobs to be done. Those of you who've attended GIF previously will know that I'm a bit of an evangelist for the jobs to be done approach. I'm sure many of you are now familiar with the technique, but simply stated, the jobs theory is grounded on the understanding that people hire products and services to enable them to get a job or jobs done. So instead of focusing on existing solutions, which timestamps technology, a jobs lens provides this longer-term stable unit of need. The benefit is it completely unshackles creative teams when addressing new needs. Now, we all have different jobs as we go about our lives, but broadly they fall into 3 categories: social, emotional, and functional. And the reason why it's important to look at the granularity of these solution-independent jobs is they provide us with the detail to inform our innovation efforts when it comes to experiences. In 1977, a reputable media researcher addressed a convention of movie theatre owners, and he predicted that the competition from the then embryonic cable network would wipe out cinema by the mid-1980s. Fast forward to today, actually, the movie industry sells 30% more tickets than it did when that doomsday prediction was issued. More people go to the movies than ever, despite the enabling technologies, despite surround sound, despite projectors and streaming and Netflix. It's about more than the functional job of watching a movie. Because there are also emotional and social jobs to be done, we are willing to spend the equivalent of 6 months Netflix membership to take our families to the cinema at the weekend. I should know, I did it last weekend. £6 for a medium bag of popcorn. Emotions are critical to our decision making, central to what it is, of course, to be human. I'll give you an example of a piece of technology that I think is about as close to human as it's possible to get, not because it has incredible machine learning algorithms or amazing precision engineering. Has anyone owned a Land Rover? And I don't mean one of those horrible things that Victoria Beckham had a hand in. Anyone owned a Land Rover? Series 1, 2, 3, Defender? Which one? The Beast. In some ways, these are one of the greatest vehicles of all time, and yet in other ways, they make no sense. The thing is, our relationship with technology is neither linear nor predictable using logic alone, and that's because our emotions get involved, right? Land Rover themselves claimed a few years back that 75% of all Land Rovers ever created were still on the road, but that's not the same as Land Rovers being reliable, right? If you own a Land Rover, a scene like this is how you spend your weekends from time to time. The totally weird thing is that doing this reinforces my bond with it. The even weirder thing about it is that if my Volvo behaved like this, I'd be absolutely furious. Stick that in a traditional segmentation model and churn it. Even my automotive jobs to be done are different. Are they practical? Yes, in many ways. Are they ergonomic? Well, it's just to say this is the pinnacle of Land Rover assistive driver entry technology. Are there technically better alternatives out there for someone wanting a comfortable 4x4 that can pull a trailer, cruise on the motorway, go green laning? Yes, of course there are. But it's more than that. A Land Rover has heritage. You become part of a mark that can trace its heartbeat back to 1948 when the Series 1 was born. Land Rover's 70 this year. The Queen has always been a huge fan. There is a camaraderie, a knowing wave all at once combining a sense of family, the shared empathy at the pains and rewards of the hours tinkering to get to the heart of something that's not quite right, because with little more than a spanner and a socket set and determination, you still can. If only you could bottle all of these emotions and sell it as a package. Well, one company did, and that company was Mazda. Kansai engineering, effective sensory emotional design, is a methodology that translates consumers' perceptions and feelings into product attributes that will, in turn, impact the 5 human senses in a highly predictable way. Far from being subjective, you can actually measure and therefore engineer perceptual responses to your products and services. It was pioneered in Japan in the 1970s and was famously used on the Mark I Miata or MX-5. This was the first time the car saw a world given a deliberately joyful personality by the upturned intake on the grille, the deliberately tuned, spine-tingling qualities of the exhaust note, the reassuring thud of quality as the door was closed. Kansai is now being deployed in product and packaging development and to help reinforce these intended attributes. And as a designer, I find this massively rewarding work. But with Max waving the 5-minute sign, I think that's probably a presentation for another day's. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm out of time. I should bring my reflections to a close. I warmly invite you all to design for experiences. Design for the social, emotional, and functional jobs to be done. When you're looking for insight and evidence to inform your innovation decisions, be mindful of the blinkers that historical patterns can create, literally. And perhaps even sprinkle a little Land Rover experience into your solutions, metaphorically, if not literally. If you do, you'll find your technology specifications actually aren't too far off track, and that actually consumers can be surprisingly forgiving of fast follower or even relatively unremarkable technology that still delivers a fantastic experience. Experience is everything. Design in human dimension. Thank you very much.